Hello and welcome to my first ever video on YouTube and also to my YouTube channel. On this channel I'm gonna cover my classical chess games, my journey to becoming hopefully better at chess, and also some instructional chess content, maybe some openings, whatever you guys want, pretty much. This first game is from the Staufer Open, which happened in the first couple of weeks of January, and I was rated around 2300 and was placed around 35th, I think, from 200. So the first couple of rounds, the goal was to basically win and then get some better opponents. And the game started against, like the first one started against Martin Wecker, who was rated around 2100, and I had white pieces, so the goal was obviously to get a win. And okay, I started with e4, which is my usual first move. I also experiment a bit with knight f3 or d4 maybe in the future. But yeah, for now, e4 is like my main repertoire. He played with e5, and after knight f3, knight f6, and he was already the first moment where I wouldn't say annoyed, but obviously if you play weaker opponents, you kind of want a disbalance in the position, and with the move knight f6, which starts the Russian defense, everything kinda gets a little bit symmetrical. So I was already a bit displeased about how he played, because he obviously, I mean, 2100, he's not a bad player. So I had to dig a bit deeper to get some play. I played d4, which is not the main move. The main move is taking on e5, and after d6, knight f3, knight takes e4. And now we can already see the symmetry in the position. There's one open line, and the rest is pretty much equal. And with this move d4, you also get those kind of variations, but the goal is, okay, you get a bit more development quicker. He took on e4, which is the main line, and after bishop d3, d5, now I played knight takes e5. It's also, again, like, it's also a bit symmetrical, but the main goal is that after knight d7 with knight c3, you can at least opt to get a bit of a different structure, also like it happened in the game. Because now I allow my opponent to give me a double isolated pawn, but at least that creates a disbalance and makes the game, in my mind, more interesting. Also, right now we're threatening to take this knight, so they do have to do something specific. Yeah, they took on e5 first and then on c3, which is principled. There are also some lines where they could have pinned the knight on c3, but that's also there are interesting lines, and in some of them we can just sack the pawn on c3 even. But yeah, I don't want to go too deep into that and more talk about the structure, because it is quite interesting. Um, we get this doubled pawns on c2 and c3. And on the first thought, you think maybe, okay, this looks horrible for white. I mean, it's a double isolated pawn. But it is not so easy to attack them or to exchange pieces and go into an endgame where those pawns could be quite a weakness. And so this weakness is not really that bad. And on the other hand, we get this nice pawn on e5, which also directs already where the game's gonna go, because we control those squares pretty nicely, and we also have a bit of an space advantage, and that allows us to potentially attack the king on the king side, and even on the queen side, due to the b line being half open, there are some chances to actually attack the king. So overall, this line, I mean, obviously the engine always thinks it's equal, but it allows for a bit of more interesting play in my mind. My opponent continued with bishop c5. I played castle, quite normal, and he castled as well. And here I wasn't too sure. I wanted to create some weaknesses on the king side, because maybe there was also some king h1 and pawn to f4, and try to push even more for the space advantage. But always after f4, the reaction from black should be f5, and I can't really take en passant, because then my structure may be really bad after queen takes f6. Um, Yeah, I started with queen h5 here. I threatened mate in one. Uh, and maybe it was smarter to start with something like rook b1. Because obviously the rook probably wants to go on the b1 square anyways, like even maybe in five or six moves. But he's ideally placed on b1 because he attacks the pawn on b6. And in some variations, if black is forced to play b6 themselves, this could be quite weakening for the light squares. For example, after rook b1, b6, if we play now queen h5, g6, which is also the direction it went in the game, also the reaction my opponent shows in the game. And now, for example, after rook h6, we can see one difference. Rook e8 looks quite normal. Black wants to go bishop f8. And now after bishop g5, bishop f8, if we just go the straight line, I'm just gonna take everything that hangs. Now we can already see quite a difference because we have potentially the square on a6 for our bishop. So let's say the bishop goes somewhere, trying to threaten the bishop on c7 and the pawn on c3. You can just go bishop a6, and now it's not so easy and not so clear how black should regain the pawn that we won. Yeah, that's just one example line where rook b1 might have been smart. But okay, I mean, I didn't see it at all. I didn't see this idea at all. So I just went queen h5 directly. My opponent went g6, as I said, and defended the mate, which was threatened. And I went queen h6. Okay, now the basic idea was maybe get something on the black squares, because those are weakened with a move g6. But I didn't have something too concrete in mind. The best my opponent could have played would have been rook e8, the exact same line as before. And if we now follow it again, bishop f8 takes. We take everything that hangs, and now even bishop d7, and it's not so clear how to stop it. And now those pawns might actually get weak. Also, now we're in an endgame, so they get even weaker, and it's not so easy to know what to do with white. But my opponent in this position, he didn't play rook e8. He opted for bishop e7. And let's take this away. And here there was actually quite an impressive idea for white, which I didn't see at all, and which I didn't even consider at all. So if you want to, you can maybe pause the video for like 5 to 10 minutes and try to find it yourself. Me, I didn't even look for it, to be honest. So if you find it really impressive, but also if you have to find the follow up, because that's like the really nice idea. Okay, so I'm gonna show it now for those who want to see it. In the game, I played f4, but in my opinion, even stronger would have been maybe h4. And this looks just, first of all, really dumb because the pawn hangs. But on second thought, if they can't take, then maybe we have some ideas with h5 to undermine the king side even more, and maybe there are even some like bishop g6, bishop takes g6 sacrifices in the air. So in my opinion, the most logical move would have been to take the pawn on h4. This is also the reason why I didn't even consider this move at all, because I mean, it looks kind of dumb. You just put the pawn there and then it's gone. But now, like, the crazy move starts, and this is actually g4, which is like incredible. And the idea is quite simple. We just want to go king g2, rook h1, and then make mate on h7. And I thought when the engine showed this line, the computer showed this line, I was like, oh my god, like you push h4, sacrifice the pawn, push g4, sacrifice the next pawn. Like, for example, after bishop g4, we just go king g2. Let's say bishop h5, and then we just go rook h1. And the bishop can't really move away because we just have rook takes h5, the rook sack, and if they take, it's mate. Ooh, yeah, it's mate. So this was an incredible idea, and there are some ways to defend for black. They aren't forced to take on h4, but I think humanly speaking, this would have been really hard. But I mean, I guess that's also the reason why I didn't find the move. In the game, I went f4. Okay, black still has to react somehow, but because we threaten f5 and then maybe f takes g6 and everything opens up, and it would have been also really, really strong. But as I said in the beginning, the usual reaction on f4 is f5, and now it's not so easy on how to actually handle the position. We will also see I mishandled the position extremely because obviously we can't really take. If we take en passant, just like some check and then queen takes f6, we don't have an attack anymore, and all those pawns are weak. So this is never really an option. So we have to let it stand like this. I mean, we do have the strong pawn on e5, but it gets blockaded and can't really move. I think my first move was still fine. I played a4, which I thought was really logical because I usually in those positions when there's not really anything going on, you want to get space advantage. So usually some a4, a5, or h4, h5. In this position, it doesn't work, but it's quite normal nowadays. Also, I had a second idea in mind, which was in hindsight not really the best. But I thought, okay, all my pawns or all my major pawns are on the black squares, so why not trade the black squared bishops, which to me seemed quite intuitive, but it wasn't really that good because okay, I prepared it with bishop a3 by playing a4, but the bishop on e7 is actually really passive, and it doesn't really make sense to trade them because also white has the space advantage, and it doesn't make sense to trade pieces to give more place and more squares for the black pieces. So the bishop would have been better placed on e3, but yeah, after c6 I played this idea bishop a3, and yeah, I just thought, okay, I mean strategically speaking it should be good, but just playing bishop e3 would have probably been better. The bishop is quite good here. There are still maybe some ideas of playing h4 h5 at some point. Maybe also some c4 is there, but yeah, just overall the bishop would have been better on e3. Bishop a3, and he played bishop e6. He consolidated as well, but this was kind of a mistake. He should have either taken directly or played c5. And now my bishop is even worse. I mean, maybe they play even b6 or something, and the bishop on a3 is really badly placed. And after bishop e6, I had a really nice option again, which I didn't go for because I thought, okay, I wanted him to take anyways because maybe my rook on a3 is better placed in some sense because he protects c3, which was complete nonsense. And I thought, okay, what else to do? Everything stands quite good, but my queen. So I thought, okay, maybe maybe I go back with my queen and activate it again, which was again not such a good idea. The best here would have been actually to exchange the bishops now and go directly for h4. We saw this idea earlier, and now obviously the h4 pawn can't be taken anymore. And yeah, we have the possibility to go h5 and try to weaken the king side even more. And the good thing with trading these bishops, which was also my original idea, if at some point like the queen trade and the rook trades, maybe this bishop is obviously really bad because all the pawns are on the white squares. Yeah, this would have been way better, but I played queen h3 with the idea of bringing the queen back, which was quite naive, to be fair. My opponent like reacted really nice now. Played bishop takes h3. I took back, and he played queen e7. And yeah, now you can also see why the rook on a3 is actually placed really badly and really poorly, because it just gets attacked. And even if I move to b3, which I did, there's always some d4 kind of threats in the air. So it wasn't the best choice. And even like the queen, he gets like a tempo and maybe goes to c5 with check, which also happened. So this whole maneuver of bishop a3 wasn't really that good. Okay, I played rook b3 to at least like get some pressure onto the b7 pawn. My opponent played queen c5 check. I played rook h1, only move, b6, protected the pawn. And here is already a bit difficult because d4 is sometimes in the air, and it's not so clear where my pieces are gonna be placed good. Like the queen on h3 is still a bit weird. The rook on b3 is a bit weird. The rook on f1 is weird. My bishop on d3 is blocked by this granite of pawns on f5, g6, h7. So actually, it's not so clear at all what I do. Yeah, I went for bishop e2 to protect this pawn on c3 with my queen and maybe be able to move my rook at some point and maybe put the bishop on f3. That were like the main ideas. My opponent played rook f7. I think he just wanted to defend something somehow. I wasn't too sure. And I played rook b4. The main idea of rook b4 was just, okay, now this is protected and maybe the rook is placed better here. I already thought, okay, maybe this game could go a bit wrong because all my pieces are so displaced. And so I had to be quite careful already. My opponent played king g7, which kind of looked to me a bit like a bit slow. Because now I could play queen g3 and actually have some slide threats. Because now maybe there's some idea with h4, h5 in some way. My opponent played king h8, and I went for it. I played h4, even though I wasn't sure if I want to play h5. Because I mean, my king is also quite weak, and the queen on c5 even covers the g1 square. So I have to pay attention to not go mate on the h line. But I thought, okay, h4 is quite useful in some senses because I mean now they can't really push g5 for the moment. Yeah, my opponent played rook g8, and I played rook f3. I wanted to cover the c3 pawn again, and thought, okay, maybe my rook is a little bit better placed on f3 than f1. But it's not actually so clear. But those positions, those close positions, they are really hard in my opinion to actually find the best moves. My opponent played h6, and now he suddenly has some ideas with g5. Not directly, but sooner. Yeah, rook g7, rook h7, and maybe some g5. So I actually have to pay like crazy attention. I played rook d4, and he played queen a3, and here I was actually quite worried because now suddenly c5 is also threatening, and I felt like, okay, somehow my position might collapse. Yeah, g5 is in the air, c5 is in the air, and when I move my rook, the a4 pawn is hanging. I was actually really worried here, and I found this idea of rook fd3. The idea was, okay, after c5 there's even c4 now, but I also thought maybe I just sacked the rook for the bishop, even though it wouldn't have been the best. And after rook takes, okay, at least now I have the d line. I have this rook, which is quite good. He could go to d6, attack those pawns, and maybe the bishop goes to c4. Obviously, it might not be fully enough compensation, but I thought, okay, I was a bit desperate, and maybe it was a good try. Practically speaking as well, because I felt like he was also a bit worried about this rook takes d5 stuff, and about the c4 stuff, obviously. But after queen c1 check, king h2, I mean, here he had to obviously calculate the same, because now after c5, I would have taken as well. Rook takes d5. This was the whole idea. And after queen c2, bishop d1. If the queen moves somewhere, then there is some rook d6 in the air. And in the game, I thought, okay, I have to have enough compensation. And it also looks like it. The g6 pawn is hanging, and the king might get weak. And now the pawn on e5 is a really nice asset. But after queen h2, he found a really nice move. He played g5. And like I said earlier, suddenly like my king is really weak. The queen covers everything on the first rank, and if he opens the position here and the rook comes to g7 or h7, I might be in big trouble, in big trouble. So here I decided to actually just play rook d1, and after queen takes c2, just play rook d2. And the queen doesn't really have a lot of squares if they go to b3. Now I can actually take, because the queen is not covering anything anymore on the first rank and is not so active anymore. That's why my opponent decided to go for queen c1, and I decided to go for rook d1, and we simply repeated the moves and made a draw here. Overall, with the first game, I was quite unhappy, because obviously I had the white pieces against on the paper weaker opponents, so I wanted to win. But I felt like he played really well, and I even got into some practical troubles. Even though the engine always claims, okay, it's equal, but I felt like I had practical problems that I had to resolve. So yeah, overall with the quality of my game, I wasn't so happy. Also, this whole plan of a4 bishop a3 was not so good and maybe a bit weak. So yeah, I hope to not bounce back in the next game, but to get the win in the next game and like really start the tournament from there on. And yeah, so much for the first game. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any suggestions or if you have any formats you want to see, maybe some study with me training guides or some openings whatsoever, then please drop a like, comment what you want to see, and see you in the next one.